does that mean? Well, just this.
Dance. Dance. Dance.
This is for all you lovers out there.
Dance.
History is gonna change. Legs in the back. Daddy-o, daddy-o. Time machine.
Come on now, party you. Come on now, party you. Come on now, party you.
Dance, dance. Dance, dance. Dance, dance. 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 We're sending you back to the future. Back. Stand up. We're sending you back.
Oh, you make like a tree.
Come on now, party you. 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 Just never would have met your father. Never would have.
Planets down to Earth, down to Earth, down to Earth. What if they read my stories? What if they won't let you pa? Planets down to Earth, down to Earth, down to Earth. What if they read my stories? What if they won't let you pa?
Deep look up, look up, deep look up, look up, deep down you look up, the world that sun look up, deep down you look up, the world.
Subject for today.
There it is. Back.
Every
Back.
morning.
You can hear a little extra something in there because our lovely PA, Miss Dickinson today, added in there. It's Topo Chico.
Oh, nice little fuzz
Wow.
there. A little bit of bubblies.
Name that
Interesting.
movie reference.
You told me that now after I have regular tap water.
Well, that's what you get.
Oh.
He's a day raider. I guess that
Only the best.
forces my hand. He's like Adam Smith. It's the invisible hand that determines my show direction. If the hand were an asshole. Gerald A. is here. How are you, sir?
I am well. Topo-less, though.
Quarter black. You were saying topo, and so I was going to say quarter, but I said coro.
I'm screwing everything up. I
Just stop
apologize.
speaking until I get through this. Quarter black Garrett is there. Audio
morning.
Wade is in third chair because we
Howdy.
now have
Oh,
my
he's over
half
there.
Asian lawyer, Bill Richmond. And we have a lot to get to today. Of course, subscribe on Crowder Bits. That's another channel here on YouTube. We're available anywhere podcasts are available. And of course, please do consider subscribing to Mug Club because we have less money than ever on YouTube, which is really just zero.
Yeah, that's what happens whenever you get.
We have the same
demonetized.
money as ever in the last couple
It's
of
like
years.
negative.
Sure.
And not all of this show is broadcast on YouTube. So after the first segment, we go exclusive to the Mug Club.
Yes.
Really quickly, let's check in with CNN and Sideshow Bob about to step into a rake.
Problem in society. It's
gonna be
And I
funny.
think it's time to reimagine what that looks like and use them in a different way. They don't have the expertise to respond to every social ill of society. Homelessness, substance use disorder.
Jim
That's one of the
Sciutto's
reasons
like,
why
I look
as a
so good in blue.
prosecutor,
This was
you know,
something
we
funny that I
made
just saw.
determination
They were talking about on
Blue,
CNN
blue.
earlier this morning. They said, why don't we defund the police and put some of that money, for example, like they make it a crime to be homeless, put more money into public housing. I thought, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. Hey, public housing, the projects, more crime or less crime?
What
Can
was
we
that?
get stats on that?
Defund the police. So,
What was that thing you burned down in Minneapolis first, like on night one? Oh yeah, that's right, affordable housing.
and we are going to be doing a rebuttal here too. We haven't done one of these in a while. A full from stem to stern rebuttal on John Oliver, his anti-police video. My question is, let me ask you this: why do you think today so many in the news, and often I'll say progressive left, but news, I repeat myself. Why do you think they can get away with these unfounded claims when there is data available, specifically regarding the police? I think a lot of us would like to find some common ground on fixing issues with the police. I've talked about police unions for a very long time, but that is not what is being requested, and the requests are predicated on lies.
Absolutely, and everybody believes them. Everybody just runs with this 2.5 times number, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But
Right.
it blows my mind that nobody's challenged this openly.
Well, I think a lot of people have.
It's a
You just
false.
use a lot of
No, I mean,
absolutes.
you don't hear it on CNN.
You're right.
You don't hear it
Well,
on
CNN
any
isn't
of the
everybody.
mainstream.
That's 4 people
Well,
in a
you're
Connect
right.
in
That's-
Charlotte.
Yeah, well, we've got a
I mean, I
cultural
get it.
problem where when people read a headline, they don't check it out.
Right.
They're not gonna go actual police statistics or let's find out what the other side has to say. It is a cultural problem. It's not
Right.
just a news problem.
I wasn't listening because I was thinking about in the Charlotte airport when they have Connect flights with U.S. Airways.
You're part of the problem.
Bojangles. Delicious. People debate about chicken. Bojangles is wonderful. The only better fried
it?
chicken I ever had was in Las Vegas, Nevada, and it was a Filipino-owned gas station. And I thought I was taking my life in my hands.
Yeah, exactly.
No. Oh. It was an explosion in my mouth with eskrima sticks. It's the Filipino art of stick fighting. You are such uncultured rubes.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Before
now.
we get to John Oliver, by the way, this is, and I'm hearing that buzz in my ear a little bit. We have one of these XLR. There's so many cords around here.
gotta hunt it down.
One of them gives you a
Shame,
buzz.
we'll do it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought I fixed it.
Especially if you consume it.
apologies.
Listen, now you're in my line of work. All right,
Gio's gonna be
Stay
walking
in
around
your
like he's
lane.
an electric eel. Right? It's like that's a long way around for a dad joke, Gerald. The old guy who was pushed down by not by Donald Trump. The old guy who was pushed down by the police.
Yeah.
That's what happens, Steven.
Out of my way,
One old guy pushes another old guy. You know.
Yeah.
Mr. Clyburn. Double permanent. Push it good. Which reminds me. I was just looking up before we get to this. The old guy who was shoved down by police officers, and Donald Trump tweeted about it. 6'9", this guy. I just went down the rabbit hole.
Deplorable.
We're not the old people, and we go like, this is really bad. Like people would say to us because we listened to punk rock, like Anti-Flaggers. I mean, there was still some semblance of there was a bridge of musical connection.
Yeah.
Right.
To now this 6'9" character.
I don't know
Not
that I've
with
heard
6'9".
anything from
Yeah, I
Mr.
know that you haven't.
6'9".
It's just literally one of his lyrics is pop, 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 dot. That's
Really?
one of the things because he's just looking for a rhyme.
Oh, okay.
And when you just think about how far we've gone to, like every one of these videos is it's just asses and I will say, I'm just saying, like literally, it's women pressing their buttocks against a man's crotch area. I'm sitting there going like, well, no, it's not culture because there's no. When
just don't know,
people go, oh,
They're
this goes back
working,
to Elvis. Listen, we can go back to the Beatles, and I want to shut up, please, just once for crying out loud. I'm trying to say something. Jill just keeps talking. What is it that you're saying?
I said, geez.
Oh, okay.
I was supporting your
Before
point.
that, have you seen the crotch rubbing with the butts?
No.
Okay. I'm trying to educate you and bridge the cultural divide.
I was
Do you not
responding.
want to hear about crotch rubbing with butts?
I don't. This feels like a trick
Trick question. He's married.
I don't. But I know you need to tell the
All
story.
of this was a workaround to get you in trouble with your wife. No, it's not cultural. You go back to the Beatles and I Want to Hold Your Hand. You can find any society. You can go to Egyptian hieroglyphics and see people holding hands. You even go like Afternoon Delight. It's still about a lover and wanting to engage in making love with a lover.
Rubbing
Even
the
let's go
booty.
a little bit more modern. Remember how controversial Salacious Salt and Pepper were? It was push it. push it real good. Now it's just rubbing my ass on your crotch, my neck, my back. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be someone's wedding song?
Yeah.
Dance floor is going to be awesome.
Let's
at that
dance.
point.
That's our song.
No,
right.
not at all.
Anyway, so I don't get it.
We do have a sponsor.
Oh, we do.
Yeah.
Oh, before we go to the Antifa story, let's go to a sponsor really quickly. Who is it? It's that's
Yeah,
right.
our new sponsor. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm thrilled. Of course, blackriflecoffee.com/crowder. They're
yeah.
a sponsor, 20% off.
Yeah.
But we have a new one.
Our new sponsor is a morning shower.
Morning shower. Thank you.
A morning shower is one of the best ways to reduce muscle tension, improve circulation, and boost your immune system. It helps to reduce stress, removes toxins, and has even been shown to help treat depression. That is, if you can get past the memories of that scene from Psycho. Showering daily helps regulate sleep patterns, improves lung function, and leaves your skin looking beautiful. Beautiful. Like the young Lila Crane who leaves the big city after stealing money from her workplace and stops for the night at the Bates Motel, only to be brutally stabbed to death in the shower by a shadowy figure. As Lila's blood circles the drain, the audience is left wondering, who was the shadowy figure? How will the film proceed after the death of the protagonist? And will I ever be able to shower again without thinking of this horrific slaughter? Regular showering is ideal for heart health, soothes itchy skin, and can even regulate your core body temperature. But not for Lila. Poor, poor Lila. A morning shower. Worth the risk.
By the way, we can't actually we can't confirm the veracity of any of those health claims.
That's true. Right.
That's my primary concern.
That's
with our recent sponsor. I apologize for putting you in a precarious situation with your wife.
She's fine. She definitely understands.
Your wife is pregnant. My wife, I think we talked about this yesterday. Well, turns out after the show, it is GBS.
What?
So it's just one of those things. It's okay. My wife is fine,
it.
but I am in a mode. Now I have to crucify all of you because I had a doctor come in and go, well, listen, who's the doctor here? I said, I don't know, asshole, because the other doctor said you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's confusing when they have different points of view and they both claim to be experts.
Bill told me to tell you to stop talking.
That's true.
Oh, that's right.
It's primarily my gripe is due to the fact that I'm anti-science.
That must be what it is.
That's a problem.
Speaking of science, gravity, Newton, the old guy who was pushed at the protest.
Hey.
Donald Trump tweeted this out that. It seems like the old guy he was saying could be, and there's no way to necessarily confirm this, that the guy could have been Antifa, the old man looking for, trying to actually obtain police scanner information.
Wow.
No idea if it's true or not, but it wouldn't surprise me.
How is he going to
he's Tom Cruise.
I love that. They're looking around at the Antifa meeting like, who are we going to send in there? No, you look like a criminal. No. Hey, John. You're 75. You look disarming.
Go back and watch that stream. My opinion changed in real time.
Right.
Yeah.
I was watching, I'm like, oh, that looks really bad because an old man is being pushed. But then you go, wait a second. He's walking up to a police officer. They said leave. They shove him, and then he's stopping short, reaching basically for the hip where a gun was. I don't know how else it's unfortunate that he fell, of course.
Right.
We'd rather that not happen. But this is where we are now as a society. When you riot and you loot and people support that and say that violence should play a role in protests, well, guess what? You're going to get more violence. That's when you get the military. That's when you get the National Guard. I don't know how you expected this to end.
Yeah. Put people on edge. This stuff happens.
So let's go right now to John Oliver. Speaking of I don't know. John Oliver.
Speaking of segues.
So, what do you think about John Oliver? We were talking about this just before the show. Is he a smart guy?
I think he's smart.
Or is he just dumb?
I think John Oliver is smart, and I think he's very funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think he's absolutely funny. I do have a bit of a different perspective. I think a lot of Americans are like, oh, stupid red coat. I don't know if they actually say that.
I don't know.
But you know what I mean? The stupid Brit, they're arrogant. Yeah, they're arrogant. Yeah. But as a Canadian, I have a bit of a different, because we still have the Queen and her money.
That's true.
We're big fans of kneeling in Canada. Been doing it for a very long time.
Kissing the ring,
Since our inception.
It's
almost
part of your
the
culture.
reason for our inception. So I have a different perspective because I just think a lot of people don't realize that someone like John Oliver can be smart, but he's smart operating with the information that he has. There is no, in Canada, in Quebec, there was no real conservative party. It would be basically sort of centrist Democrat with maybe pro-life leanings in Canada, and you might get that in Britain. Now it's changed a bit with Brexit, but they do have blind spots, and it doesn't mean they're dumb, but he certainly is misinformed because he comes from an inferior country.
He seems like he's willfully ignorant at times.
Did you say Wilford?
Wilford.
Is there stroke gas going through the vents here?
Pretty much. Something was sprayed earlier. Yeah, but he seems very knowledgeable. Sometimes you're like, oh, that's a great point, and you're right. He is funny.
Yeah.
And then other times he says stuff, and I'm like, wait a minute, you sound like an idiot. Like you sound like somebody who's never looked into anything that you're talking about.
Well, he doesn't. He has 54 researchers and writers do it. So you would. So
there's 55 idiots.
A
then.
little less grace. But he did a whole video here on the police, and like always, doesn't really call for concrete solutions. It's always just bitching about what is wrong and where the right is wrong. It's a lot easier to criticize without offering any sort of constructive solutions than it is to try and put in the legwork. So that being said, he gets so much of this wrong. I encourage you to go watch the entire video. I don't know if you can pirate it like I used to with Michael Moore films. I'd be like, no, I want to see I Spy with Owen Wilson and Eddie Murphy. No one wants to see I Spy.
No.
Yeah, nobody saw that.
They should have known.
But,
the people at the movie theater.
It was Fahrenheit 9/11. You won't get a dime out of me because I don't want it going to Enron, one of your investments, Michael Moore.
Creative. I like that.
Let's start this off with John Oliver and everything wrong with his police bias, anti-police video. Let's go.
In response to those protests, which have been a stirring pushback against institutional racism and brutality, it's been frankly sickening to see them met with this.
Across the country, peaceful protests have too often devolved into standoffs with heavily armed police using military-style tactics.
Oh, military-style tactics.
It's like, what does that mean?
Are these the same people who, by the way, say military-style weapons when they're talking about AR-15 and conflate semi-automatic with fully automatic? And by the way, we need to be we need to be deliberate about this. The reason that police moved from, say, revolvers to semi-autos is because of the 96, I think, Miami shootout. I don't have a source for this, but I believe it was 8 FBI agents and 2 perps who had committed many violent crimes. They killed 2 officers, so 8 of them, and they were outgunned. 120-something rounds were fired. Wow. And they realized they were outgunned by people on the street. And they didn't even have, I don't believe, AR-15s. They had 223s, and so they said, oh, we can't have service revolvers anymore, because this is one thing where you talk about using military tactics against civilians. Are the Crips and Bloods just civilians? Are we going to put them all under the same umbrella? I think we sort of need the police force to be adept and to be equipped. I don't mean that there should be this crazy superpower like the American military, which I do support. I like us being number one there, because they need to protect civilians. If you need to protect civilians from people who have military-style weapons, and many of them actually do. If you go down to the wrong area of Los Angeles, they have fully automatic AK-47s.
Well, that's the Koreans protecting their businesses. So
No. They don't break the law. They have guns that are legal. I'm talking about people who illegally use firearms in Los Angeles, which really in Los Angeles means anyone who owns firearms. So good point.
It's like a small arms race. They get armor piercing. They get armor that's better. They get better guns. They have So you just keep going up and up.
And do you notice there's no mention, by the way, from John Oliver, no mention at all of any violence at the protests. So this sets the whole tone. So you think, wow, these are mostly peaceful protests. No, in major cities, all of them, without exception. Maybe now there might be 2 exceptions. I'm not talking about 40 people in some place in West Texas or 20 people in a separate protest in Hermosa Beach. New York, Los Angeles, Minneapolis, Baltimore, Detroit, Dallas. Take your pick. The majority of them, the vast majority, if not all, once the lights go out at night, have resulted in violent protests. That is not mentioned during this video, or at least not really touched upon, considering it's 30-something minutes berating police officers. Let me give you a couple numbers in case you don't know. 13 people last week were killed from the riot. The number's now over 20 people, 400 officers injured. If at that point officers don't have the right to respond with riot gear, then I guess just completely disband the police.
Well, what do you think was happening in L.A. and Chicago and New York when they met the next morning after night 1 of the protests? Guys, here's the footage of what happened last night. This is coming to a theater near you. We have to be ready.
Right.
The tone was set by the first night of burning everything down and looting. You want to have a peaceful protest? You want to have peaceful protests around the country? Don't start off like that, because the police are expecting it to turn violent.
They're going to right now is you have to send in the firefighters. If you want to remodel your home, great. But if it's on fire, send in the firefighters first. Right now, cities are on fire.
Exactly.
We need to be clear about that. So what we really need to deal with is systemic discrimination. No, what we really need to deal with is several dozen people being killed by looters and rioters and 400 officers injured, and the vast majority of Americans, 70-something%, supporting the National Guard going in because they're afraid in their own cities. So no. I get that you want crown molding moving forward, and that would be nice. Right now, I want to prevent the House from setting the neighbor's house ablaze. Let's go to the next clip.
The protesters' message has taken many forms, from chants to signs to a man who called into an LA Police Commission meeting held over Zoom.
how about shooting David Dorn? Why don't they talk about all of the forms that this protest has taken? It's like taking Dracula can take many different forms. A human. What about a bat?
Yeah.
You're limiting him. Don't do that.
David Dorn, Patrick Underwood, for people who don't remember, these are officers, black officers who've been killed, and you can find more footage than you could watch in the span of this show of black officers being berated by privileged white protesters.
Right, and John Oliver doesn't get to pick which of those is representative. They're both happening, and we can see videos of both of them, but has John Oliver seen these videos? I don't know. I mean, a lot of people have been insulated from a lot of the violence.
Right, yeah.
It's a tragedy.
Well, later on in the video, and this is one of the segments that he just kind of brushes over, he's like, and if you're worried about, and he shows like a Macy's store's boarded up, he's like, if you're worried about this more than you're worried about something else, then you're wrong. Yeah, he says something much more vulgar than that, like F off, right? And I'm like, okay, so you definitely know.
See, now I'm saying, oh, geez.
My sensibilities.
Shut up on the OGs.
No, but now you know he's seen it, and he's just saying that doesn't matter. And so your point's very valid, right? The house is burning down right now. What we have to do is make sure that we save the house. We can't worry about the furniture right now because you burned down the freaking
let's
house.
Be honest, John Oliver's house is pretty safe.
Oh,
yeah,
that's true.
It's got hedges and gates.
But these violent rioters and looters will be shocked to find out you are not amongst them.
You are a man of the people.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You know what? Let's go to the next clip. There's so many from John Oliver.
In announcing job numbers on Friday, invoked George Floyd's name, saying this was a great day for him, which is utterly f***ing disgusting.
It would be if that were true at all.
Oh, wait.
I would agree. How many times on this show we said, yeah, Donald Trump's an asshole, but he's our asshole. I just started talking about it yesterday. They said this must be a typo. 300 jobs gained. Gained, people. It's hilarious because of the assholery. I agree with you. But in this case, that is not what he was actually talking about. Specifically, people receiving equal treatment under the law. Here's the actual clip for context, which John Oliver doesn't show you.
Equal justice under the law must mean that every American receives equal treatment in every encounter with law enforcement, regardless of race, color, gender, or creed. They have to receive fair treatment from law enforcement. They have to receive it. We all saw what happened last week. We can't let that happen. Hopefully George is looking down right now and saying there's a great thing that's happening for our country. There's a great day for him. It's a great day for everybody.
Now,
sounds great.
Not only does that entirely change the context, who would have thought, let's say in the year 2008, that would be a controversial statement.
Right. Yeah.
And remember when we were watching the stream, Don Lemon said, why can't our president let the name of George Floyd leave his mouth? He just did it there, and you lie about it.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's why.
25% of his speech that day was devoted to George Floyd and the incident that happened, but we can't talk about that.
Yeah, and we've got to cover every other Donald Trump tweet.
Yes.
Right, yes,
of course.
Exactly.
Yeah,
cover
except
all
for
of them.
Every
except for
single
that
other
awesome
one.
video that he put out.
Right, yeah, exactly. Well, it doesn't exist anymore. Nothingness. All right. I'm trying to see what else we have from John Oliver. Oh, yeah, this next clip is great.
It didn't start this week or with this president, and it always disproportionately falls on black communities. Because here are some hard facts. In Minneapolis, where George Floyd was murdered, police use force against black people at 7 times the rate of whites. Black Americans are 2.5 times more likely than whites to be killed by police. And about 1 in every 1,000 black men can expect to be killed by police. If you're black in America, I can't even begin to imagine how scared, angry, and exhausted you must feel.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, let me ask you this. What do you think when you're talking about interactions with police officers? And this is, all of those numbers are accurate. I want to be clear, the numbers that he cites, but the context there does matter.
Context.
What do you think should be the most relevant number when talking about disproportional violence committed against people of a specific race in the United States?
Police interactions. How many times do you interact?
How often do you commit violent crime?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
If it's 2.7 times the amount of killings of black people from officers, let's say in Minneapolis or whatever the number is that he says, well, hold on a second, it matters if they make up 10 to 15% of the population and commit, I have it right here, 53% of known homicide in the United States, 60% of robberies. But there are only 25% of those killed by police. So it doesn't matter just what the percentage of the population is black or white.
Right.
It doesn't just matter the numbers don't exist in a vacuum. It is how often are these groups of people committing crimes. And again, this is why we talked about George Floyd versus David Dorn or Patrick Underwood. Why does it matter? It's not just to go tit for tat. Hey, Black Lives Matter, black officer. No, it's because we need to address the actual problems in the community, just like we need to address the actual problems with police. Defunding police won't work. It's not going to help. I know you're trying to shift the Overton window, but really you're just in rear window looking through a telescope going, oh, I don't have a dog in this fight. Yeah, defund the entire police. I know it's never going to happen. So...
And then the guy looks.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
no. Give me the look.
Spoiler, I'm sorry.
That was a good look.
Give me the look.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
You got chills.
Is that Raymond Burr?
I got an erection. So,
Whoa.
Really?
No, not yeah, really. So,
there's another G's for you.
Again, police fatally shot 9 unarmed black men last year, 2019. Not as bad as during the Obama years. 19 unarmed whites, which really, that's a startling statistic when you consider how much of the crime is made up by black American offenders. And again, this goes back to the idea of we don't need police, we need more public housing. You can't find a ne'er-do-well in public housing or the projects, as it's been heard on every single hip-hop mixtape since 1994. Right? There's a reason.
That's where you go to get street cred, okay?
Exactly. That's where you go when a rich white record executive says, you're not hard enough, let's send you to the projects on a weekend getaway. Somebody will shoot you, it'll go straight through the cheek, and then you come back in and we make you look mean.
You'll be just fine. So we're having an emotional response right now to this, and that's understandable, right? It's understandable to be emotionally angry at stuff that's happening in the world around you, right? We don't need an emotional response when we want to change things.
Right.
We don't want to respond emotionally because our feelings are real, but they're not always reliable. And right now, they're not very reliable saying, get rid of the police. They're not very reliable when it says 2.5 times the number of black people are shot by cops than white people when it's like saying that I'm still one of the top 1% of tight ends in the nation. That's true if you take the entire population of people and include people who don't play football. Put me in the NFL where it matters, where the stat really matters.
Yeah.
I'm not in the top 1%, okay? That's where it matters. And that's what people are doing right now when they're saying of the entire population, and they're not taking in context anything else.
Also, again, in the NFL, you'd stick out like a very white sore thumb.
No, there's tons of white tight ends.
It's like a target.
Are there in tight ends?
Tight ends are still predominant. I don't know. I don't know if there's.
Hey, remember the tight ends.
Not that I care. It's just like,
do you want to
for
swap
some reason,
seats?
it's a
I'm
thing.
sorry.
I'm sorry. It's going to be musical chairs. Wait, gone. And there have been.
There's a chair in the hall.
I never win. That's the point. Many studies have found, by the way, we can bring this up, that police are no more likely to shoot black people than white people. Now, I hate the fact that I have to say black, white, because this is the way it's framed from the left. And we'll go to Drew Brees in a little bit. When you try to make people feel ashamed exclusively because of their race, don't be surprised when people all of a sudden take pride in exclusively their race. There will be more racists created than ever in my lifetime because you have asked white people to kneel in subservience for a crime they didn't commit. This is why I said weeks ago, stop this, please. It's going to get bad. Please stop this. There's a better way to go about it. Well, here we are, and John Oliver is leading the charge from his penthouse, of course, not actually down on the ground. He has a drone that goes, let's go, guys.
Some of America's first law enforcement units were the slave patrols tasked with capturing and returning people who'd escaped from slavery. And when slavery ended, white people had no intention of letting that be the end of white power.
What was a British colonial police force like there? Any relation to slavery, John Oliver? And he uses this to transition into, of course, so this is indicative of systemic racism because it's based on systemic discrimination. Name a single racist law today. Name a single form of systemic oppression. In this case, specific, because it changes, whether it's transgenders, taking a dump in Target, right? But today, we've gone back to black. So name me one law that specifically discriminates, oppresses, or targets black individuals, putting them at a systemic disadvantage. One. I can name several that give legs up to try and correct this, whether you're talking about affirmative action, whether you're talking about diversity hires, quotas, which is supported by everyone at the DNC. Name me one that is pool dunking a black person in 2020. Stay down there because we had slavery and police. Don't you know that police were created to keep slaves in this country? What are you doing? Is that what he really thinks is going on? Name me one. That's a challenge to anybody out there.
Yeah, and if they could, we could target that. We could fight that. We could go after that and get rid of that policy.
If they weren't the boy that cried wolf, right?
If you can name me a racist politician, or if you can name me racist cops, if you can tell me people that you can prove this person is targeting people based on race, we can deal with that. You know what we can't deal with? Systemic racism, this ethereal concept that the whole thing is rigged against you.
Everything gets labeled that nothing is.
And the whole concept of systemic racism removes any personal responsibility from an individual.
Right.
So if you're down, it's not because you've chosen to be down or even relatively chosen to be down. It's that you are oppressed by this particular system.
Or now even it's gone further. If you commit a crime, it's not really your fault.
Right.
It's because of systemic discrimination. It's because of the system. But you burned a car. Toyota's bullshit.
I don't own that car. We don't own nothing, so we can burn it.
I tell you what, I'll share it. I'll get your cars. Y'all want a Toyota? I got a Lexus over here.
Just got it last
By
night.
the way, what you want to Target? I'm making a run.
So and why, if this is all true, why is nobody talking about married privilege?
Right.
People who are married tend to commit crimes at the same level, no matter their color.
Right.
Right. They tend to be arrested at the same level, no matter their color.
Right.
So we should all be talking about married privilege.
Well, we should also be talking about having a dad privilege, having a mom and dad privilege, children.
I just want to apologize for my having a dad privilege.
Yes, you absolutely
You should feel horrible.
And I will say this, you know what? That is something that I do consider a privilege.
Sure. Yeah.
Like I don't consider. The term white privilege is so loaded. And when we talk about racism for the longest, what do we mean? We meant vilifying people or condemning people exclusively because of their race. Not seeing people as different because of their race, though at one point that was considered racist because we're all supposed to be colorblind. Now you're not a good ally if you're colorblind. But specifically indicting someone based on the color of their skin. That's racist. Right. I don't believe in reverse racism. I believe in racism, period. So let me ask you this. Who is more racist? Any of the white guys here, quarter black guy here in this room who's saying, listen, name us a single racist policy that we can fix so we can actually find out what the problem is if it exists, or the person saying, kneel, white devil. Right. That is textbook racism. Demanding that somebody kneel. Kneeling, let's be clear, is not equality. Kneeling is subservience. Kneeling specifically is it means without question. It means giving authority without question, regardless of the request made. That is why I will talk, I will listen, I will discuss, I will hear your grievances, I will never kneel, and I will never vote for a politician who kneels. That includes Donald Trump or Mike Pence. If Donald Trump or Mike Pence take a knee, I'm not voting for him.
And the people who are kneeling, if you're a black person making a white person kneel, the white person kneeling in front of you is afraid of you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Is that what you want?
Is this the relationship that you want?
Right.
Do you want, or
That's
do you want
equality.
friendship?
Like, okay. It's equality. Shit feels good.
Right. Yeah. Well, didn't you know that the easiest way to fix racism is just to add more racism?
Oh, right.
Right. And so it just helps.
Right.
I don't know why, but
how
it does.
do we solve the greatest evil of this country? Let's bring in more black slave traders. That should even the playing field.
Yeah. That
didn't work the first time.
Yeah. There were black slave owners.
That's true.
I forgot.
It's called revenge.
But the point is, you need to have equality. Blah blah. Okay, let's go to the next clip.
What the major obstacles to reform have been, because one of the biggest issues is police unions. Even in cities where the mayor and police chief say all the right things, it's important to know that the union can stop whatever they are proposing dead in its tracks. And unions can make it incredibly difficult to discipline officers even for egregious misconduct. Take what happened in Minneapolis with two officers who belong to our friend Bob's union.
Okay, Bob. Common ground solutions. So I've said this many times. Dissolve police unions. Right now, if we're talking about complete abolition of the police, which a significant portion of protesters are, including the protesters who berated the mayor. Let's be clear. Some people are now trying to sort of sugarcoat and say, well, we just mean defund some portions of the police for social workers, which, by the way, I would be on board with if I didn't know that then you were going to demand defunding all police. But we should start with that, dissolve police unions, and then if we want a union, build one up with some kind of accountability. Now, there's some common ground. But John Oliver has done segments on unions, has done segments on right-to-work states. So if we are trying to find a common ground solution, and we are considered radical right-wing extremists, let me ask you this. When I say dissolve police unions, it is 100% consistent with my views on unions across the board in every other sector of life. When John Oliver says we need to do something about police unions, it is entirely an anomaly with his view of unions in every other aspect of his life. So who is the radical if the common ground solution that we can find right now is consistent with my view, the all year long.
Yeah.
And I'm glad he said it. I'm just glad that he acknowledged, like, hey,
it's
these guys are part of the problem. Guess what? Hopefully, you'll keep walking down the road and see that most of them are part of the problem.
How many Democrats do you think are going to vote to dissolve police unions and set that precedent?
Right.
I know.
Yeah. Well, he keeps saying, and I think he said it in this clip, but I'm not sure. He keeps using the word "we,"
right,
as if we need to be part of the solution. Who are you?
Yeah.
You're some brummie from England, right? What do you
limey?
How do you think? Yeah, how do you
You limey. No, you're absolutely right.
But does he think that he's part of the problem? I mean, you know, Britain had the slave trade too. They abolished.
Yeah, and a lot of people are like, well, Britain
War.
abolished it before. Well, it still existed in the English Empire long after we abolished slavery. That's one thing that people don't understand. Some people are like, I had families flee to Canada. Depends on when that happened, because in Canada, they said, oh, great, look, more slaves. Okay, I'll go over here and join your enslaved brethren.
Plantation you're going to live at.
They're the ones that sent out the flyers. Come to Canada, you'll be free.
And as if he thinks that because he's a white person living in America, that he was part of the problem and he needs to be part of the solution. He's an Englishman. How is he going to solve American racism?
Which is also something to me that is so... there are protests in Paris and London and Marseille. It's like, hold on a second. Are you saying that all of your police forces are racist? Well, let's discount the French, because they're just always looking for a reason to riot, and there hasn't been a soccer game because of the COVID. So are you saying that your police force is racist, in which case it's not inherently unique to American history, or are you rioting and burning down your cities because you have a problem with the Minneapolis police force, in which case you're just looking for a reason to burn down cities?
Right.
There's no reason that people should be rioting anywhere in Europe.
Yeah, if you've got a cinder block about to throw it through a CVS or whatever they have over there, then
I think it's a big Rite Aid.
Yeah, there we go. The problem is not in your system. Right. The problem is in you.
The problem's in your hands.
There we go. Yeah. You are the problem.
It is the cinder block, largely.
Go for a brick a little thicker.
Yeah, a little bit thicker. You can break cinder blocks really easily, especially if you pre-break them like Bruce Lee in his little demonstrations. Like, ha-ha! Oh, yeah, I saw you already pre-cracked that. Here, use my cinder block. I don't want. Okay, I understand.
I don't do party tricks.
It's such bull crap. I watched that 30 for... And listen, Bruce Lee, brilliant theorist, martial art. On that front, of course, we've talked about this. But this idea of breaking boards and cinder... No one is going down to a construction site and telling the foreman, hey, listen, if you need a hand, I can 1-inch punch... No. It's a charade. They're charlatans. By the way, hit the notification bell. Hit all notifications if you're watching on YouTube, because subscriptions don't mean a whole lot. New videos go up every single day, and of course there's a live stream on Thursday. And do consider joining Mug Club if you enjoy this content, because those who support the paid content, that's the only reason that there's free content to begin with, and you get a wonderful hand-etched mug, hand-painted and hand-etched by Americans.
Yeah, it's fantastic. By the way, how is this not sticking to Democrats at all? Like, all of these problem cities that we hear about are controlled almost exclusively by Democrats.
That's pretty much all large cities, though.
I know, but for decades, are people not going, hey, I keep voting for these people, and they can't change anything. Like, if it's systemic, they're a part of the system. The people that you put in office are the system. There is no other system than that.
Look at the Baltimore mayor and city council when that stuff happened.
I forget who said it, but how did Donald Trump end up being able to mess up only Democrat-run cities?
Right.
That's
genius.
He's like a selective intestinal binder. It only binds to toxins, not nutrients. That's what they say for the detox. A little inside baseball. Let's go to the next clip.
And if a city doesn't feel that it has to settle with you, you're in real trouble, because civil suits against cops are nearly impossible to win. Just listen to a defense attorney explain one reason that it was going to be difficult for Michael Brown's family to sue the Ferguson officer who killed him.
Civilly, sure, they could go after him civilly. The problem is he has qualified immunity. He's going to say that I was acting within the scope of my employment. This is what I was doing.
Yeah, and he is right about that.
Okay, so let's be clear. With hundreds of staffers over there at HBO and a multi-million-dollar salary himself, his source, not like the FBI, DOJ, or the New York Times that we use here, is a guy. With a Chiron that says defense attorney who likely hasn't practiced law in many years because he's mostly spending his time being a guy on television.
But I trust that guy. He's on the TV.
It's very hard to sue. Just listen to this guy who I handpicked to make my point.
It's not even a good point.
And he's right.
Because I wouldn't have picked him otherwise.
Some wrong guy.
I don't know why it's all of a sudden starting to sound more like post-Krishna Beatles. No, the reason it was difficult for Mike Brown to sue Darren Wilson's family, the officer in question, is because unlike the hands up, don't shoot lie, Mike Brown was repeatedly punching the officer in the head and reaching for his gun. Specifically, an officer, by the way, who was known to serve underprivileged and minority communities and had a stellar track record. Very different from the George Floyd situation. Mike Brown, which was the catalyst for all of this, it would be really hard to sue someone for murder when you're trying to murder them.
Well, this was in our montage, I think, on Thursday, where a guy was going in to loot a store, and a white guy who owned the store was holding a shotgun at him. This guy starts walking toward the guy with the shotgun saying, "Hands up, don't shoot." Like he's the victim in this scenario.
Like it's not parlay.
Exactly. Hands up. Also, I'm going to steal everything.
It was like that one lady, I think we'll be talking about this tomorrow on the show, all of the myths of these protesters like Skurlock. One of them that Ilhan Omar tweeted out, the lady who was being choked by the officer. She was never choked by the officer. And then when you see the full context, the lady was hitting the gear shift while the officer was pulling over, refused to provide ID, kept reaching into her purse when he said, don't reach into the purse. And then finally, when he's trying to get her to the ground, she goes, "I said I want a sheriff!" Well, I don't give a rat's ass. Can you imagine? I mean, I don't know what the Black Lives Matter equivalent to Karen is, but let's find a name for it. That's not how it works. I asked, did you not hear? I said, sheriff. It's like, I said I'm free. That's not how this works. Could you imagine? No one would ever be arrested. It's like, right. Is this bag of methamphetamine and this AK-47 yours and those underage children in the back of your car, did they come in from Honduras as sex slaves? Sheriff! Damn it. We're going to wait here for another. We're going to be here a while. You want some decaf?
I'm safe. I'm safe. I'm on base.
Oh, my God.
No,
this is just absolutely ridiculous to me. The hands up, don't shoot. The mantra is a lie. People, you have the right, by the way, you have the right to not allow an officer to search your vehicle. Just to be clear, if there's not a valid warrant, when you get, and I think this is important for people to know, there are videos on this, you have the right to not be detained unless you are being charged. You have the right to ask officers questions. You should never say, when the officer says, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Your answer should always be, no.
You tell me.
It's a fishing question.
Right.
I learned that one the hard way. When I said broken taillight, he said, speeding. I said, damn it.
The taillight's been fixed.
Yes.
Right. But you know what else makes it hard for you to sue somebody is when he was performing his job, not just because that shields him, but because he was defending his life, right? Not all shootings are crimes. And in this case, we talked about it, he was defending his life, and you make that sound like it's a bad thing. John Oliver's making it sound like he was murdered.
Right.
It wasn't murdered when you're beating somebody up.
And that's why I understand your question. Is he stupid?
This is one of those points.
What I mean? It's like someone who says women get 75 cents on the dollar. I don't believe Barack Obama is stupid. I believe that Barack Obama has decided the ends justify the means, and he's going to perpetuate that lie in the American public, despite the fact that he's probably read The Economist once.
At least. There are people surrounding him. All of John Oliver's researchers have the same perspective. They're not going to send him the sources that don't agree with him.
Right.
So obviously he has things hand selected before they get to him, so he can't reason through it.
Right.
But this is the weakest of all of their arguments, right? Of all the people, right? Because Trayvon Martin wasn't a police officer that had any interaction with him, but this is in my opinion, the weakest one
of
all of them. Like, why do you pick
Tamir
Mike
Rice
Brown?
was pretty bad too, because he was, had his hood on in the park and he was aiming what looked like a real gun at people.
Yeah, exactly.
And they were, people were like, he shot someone with a toy gun. Listen, it wasn't like a translucent Dollar Tree squirt gun. It looked like a replica.
And it wasn't like it was just sitting in his backpack and threatening people with it.
It wasn't some guy who was in a Nerf or Nothing commercial.
Shooting down barrels.
Let's go here to the. Oh, by the way, we have Manny, the art critic.
Coming up
later. He has strong opinions on postmodern art, so that'll be a little bit later. Let's move on to the next clip.
Defunding the police absolutely does not mean that we eliminate all cops and just succumb to the purge. Instead, it's about moving away from a narrow conception of public safety that relies on policing and punishment and investing in a community's actual safety net. Things like stable housing, mental health services, and community organizations.
Stable housing. Again, more crime or less crime? How do you deal with the crime in stable housing? The projects. Ooh, yeah, that's right. You need police. How do you deal with the crime in Baltimore-Ferguson, where there was potential irreparable economic damage? Why do you think that people in those cities said, we want the police back in here? Stat. Because it's necessary to protect people who are actually trying to keep an economy alive in these cities. You don't base policy around the people tearing down lives and economies. You base policy around protecting people who are actual contributors. And in these neighborhoods, that's why most of these businesses are often black owned, and they have a very different opinion, and they don't get a voice on CNN.
Absolutely. And what you don't know, Stephen, is that when police are present, that's what causes crime. So if there weren't police in these communities, there would be it would be a utopia.
Right.
It would just be like a nice apartment building instead of the projects.
Right. The problem is that they actually do believe that people are inherently good.
Right.
If you take
That's
away the outer
fundamental
constraints.
difference between
If you take away any outer constraints, everybody will be able to live up to their full potential and be able to creatively express themselves. But it's a Marxist lie. It's this idea that, again, the problem is authority. The problem is power. No, actually, the problem is our hearts. The problem is that we hate each other, right? That we love evil.
Only it's like every year before this year, in history, forever has been it's ridiculous how they think that
all of a sudden this is
all of a sudden everybody's
problem,
going to hug each other and we're just going to give each other free things and we can barter and it's going to be fine.
And the problem is with authority, and how do we fix it? By monumental authority and a centralized
right, exactly.
Like, how do you enforce it? How do you enforce it?
These are not libertarians.
Self-defeating worldview. It cannot work. And I tell you what, not only have you turned more people racist, which just terrifies me to think of the ramifications 10 years down the line, but you've also turned more people who were libertarian into semi-populist nationalists. Because I will tell you this, I'm someone who obviously has espoused personal liberties and defunding the police, or dissolving the police union, for a very long time. But now at this point I go, I would have never imagined myself saying, send in the United States Army. But when you have to react to a city on fire, you've moved people like me to actually trusting the authority of the government to some degree because of social media. They're more dangerous sometimes than even the United States government, because people who are killing over 20 Americans in cities and harming our officers and demanding the total defunding of police, and city councils are actually complicit with it, it makes me go, I guess we do need the feds to step in. I don't like this about myself.
Well, it's the exact same reason a lot of conservatives have adopted the Social Security thing as being a necessary thing, because they see that in a lot of ways churches, families have all failed to take care of their people. Right. And so, I guess some other higher.
By the way, their people could be black, could be white, could be black, could be Tudor Bismarck.
Absolutely. So do we really think that we're in a position culturally where we can actually take away all of our safety nets that we've put in? I don't think so. I think we should take away the safety nets, but the safety nets are a symptom of a larger cultural problem, again, that starts with ourselves.
Disagree. The safety nets have been working like a charm.
Oh, okay.
While we're talking about
I'm so sorry.
defunding
How
the
dare
police.
you? Forgive me.
Nary a criticism of the social safety nets. It doesn't mean totally defunding the police. Take it from MPD 150. This is the activist group, by the way, that's pushing for the complete abolishment of Minneapolis police. When we talk about abolition here in Minneapolis, we're not talking about rebranding police or privatizing police or community policing or any of the reform tactics that could potentially be used to undermine this work. We're talking about building a police-free future. So what are you supposed to do in this police-free future? Let's say if someone like a George Floyd who broke in and jammed a pistol into a pregnant woman's gut, what do you do if you're that woman today? Here, let's watch on CNN.
Do you understand that the word dismantle or police free also makes some people nervous? For instance, what if in the middle of the night my home is broken into? Who do I call?
Yes, I mean, I hear that loud and clear from a lot of my neighbors. And I know, and myself too, and I know that comes from a place of privilege, because for those of us for whom the system is working, I think we need to step back and imagine what it would feel like to already live in that reality where calling the police may mean more harm is done.
That's the city council president, just to be clear. That's not some random person. Why do you take an extreme example to make a point? That's the person in charge of the pledges and votes. Wow. Isn't that terrifying? So my body, my choice, unless we're talking about rape, then it's wombs for all.
Gosh. Yeah, well, if the system's not working for you, tear down the system. I guess that's the idea.
And does anyone actually believe for a second that if a black woman is being raped and calls the police show up and be like, good job, go get him, tiger, and walks out? No, of course not. And even if you believe that what happened with George Floyd is indicative of the entire police force, which I don't, I do think we have some bad police officers, and I think the unions protect them, and we need to do something about that, absolutely. That does not mean that police are not answering calls in these neighborhoods, because keep in mind, most of these police live in these communities.
Yeah. You know who gets the most upset about this? Law-abiding citizens that live in those communities that are like, why won't the police come and help me?
Right.
And some of the worst places in America, in Los Angeles and New York and Chicago, and I name them because they have some of the worst places in America, right? Detroit, cops just sometimes don't go to certain areas at certain times because it's not safe for them
And do you
to
know
go.
who's most harmed by it? While we're talking about all these gaps, and we're talking about, do you know who will be most harmed by this? Is black women.
Yes.
Black women specifically. Black women will be defenseless and helpless. And I want to see, well, first off, I want black women out there to arm themselves. I want black women to be able to defend themselves because police response time isn't the same in the whole country. I want to read more stories of strong black woman shoots would-be intruder and rapist instead of black woman victim of repeated domestic abuse, like 6ix9ine's girlfriend of 7 years, by the way. And unfortunately, we also do have a community that glorifies it when you look at a lot of our culture and when you look at hip-hop. I was amazed. I went down the rabbit hole of Charlemagne and the 6ix9ine guy, 6669. This guy committed sex acts with a minor on videotape. He beat his girlfriend for 7 years, admitted to it, joined a gang, put a hit on somebody to have the guy shot, and then snitched on the gang, so he got a plea bargain, and then he was sentenced to prison, and he got out because of coronavirus and his asthma condition. Could you have more of a pussy? And this guy is being glorified?
Still a hero.
Well, and who has the privilege in that situation? This guy obviously does because he's famous and has asthma. Right? Are we calling it asthma privilege?
Okay,
barely rhyme.
I can't be in with coronavirus because my asthma. My asthma. Take his glasses, make a magnifying glass, start a fire.
Well, what about the black cops too? I mean, when you make a call for the police, it's not like you're just going to get white cops every single time. You're going to get black cops and
there are more black cops than there are black people in this country.
So can I check my
as far as
percentage? Is this like a menu when I call in an emergency? Can I say I would prefer black police officers or Hispanic police officers?
Yeah.
Like, is that the privilege that we're
I like
talking
my
about as well?
police officers a la race cart.
Sir, what is your police officer
Unfortunately,
preference?
right now, our whole police system is family style.
It's like tapas.
Also, no Italian cops. Don't trust the guineas. Let's go to the next clip.
This clearly isn't about individual officers. It's about a structure built on systemic racism that this country created intentionally and now needs to dismantle intentionally and replace with one that takes into account the needs of the people that it actually serves. And this is going to take sustained pressure and attention over a long period of time.
Okay, a couple of things to get to here. How funny would it be if I got taken off YouTube for Guinea?
That's the least of all your offenses.
That's what it is. Like, he said Guinea, there's one guy like, hey, I used to be a fan.
What does that mean?
What does it mean? I'm from Sicily.
He has changed.
I can't even watch a True Romance without my blood boiling.
You're banned from Italy.
One thing that I know here, well, listen, if they ban me, if it comes along with banning rapist migrants, I'll take the L.
Sure. Yeah.
When they talk about serving their community, again, many of these officers are from these communities. Why isn't anyone asking how we can serve noble police officers?
Yeah.
That's something people say, mostly peaceful protesters. Well, I disagree, but certainly mostly peaceful officers, right? How about we find out how we can serve? Because I'll tell you what, this is something that I challenge everybody to do out there, and I would like you to comment, let me know that if you've done this. But I have been just driving up to, and again, I always make sure my hands, I don't say hands up, don't shoot, and then reach for the gun.
Right.
No.
Hi, officer,
Bad
and I say, hey, listen, thanks, I appreciate you. I know that it's a tough job right now. I had one officer choke up.
Yeah.
If everyone out there just does that, and listen, there's a 1 out of 10 shot that you say it to a dick who's like, yeah, that gives me the right to go give swirlies, and that's a problem. But we can help the other night. So this is one thing I really do. We're talking about the marginalized. We're talking about people who've been stereotyped. Listen, what about the good black cop, the David Dorns out there? That really is the forgotten hero. As far as John Oliver's final point, it really is. That's what I'm talking. It's about individual officers. The 9 unarmed black victims from last year that I talked about, 9 total fatally shot unarmed black victims. That represents 0.1% of all African American deaths in 2019. Blacks are far more likely in this country to be killed by other black Americans than by any other race. It's not even close. That is a problem that we need to address. And by the way, it doesn't address creating more government housing. If people go into government housing, they're still being raped, abused, and killed by other fellow black members of that government housing project. It doesn't, throwing money at it doesn't solve the problem. We see it with schools in Detroit, and we see it with project housing. This isn't, people want to say you're being superficial. You don't want to get to the root of the problem. Well, it seems to me the only root of the problem that you see is white people and more money, please, more money, please. And we know that hasn't worked, period.
Yeah, well, and you'll have willing and sympathetic ears on the Democratic side because they know that if they just keep promising you free stuff, promising a better tomorrow, promising that it's going to get better, but never actually delivering, you'll vote for them for the rest of your lives. Right. It's the one thing that just, again, blows my mind that the people that you elected can't deliver for you, and you keep voting for them every single time. And you and I would agree, we want better training for police officers. We want more funding to go to programs that keep people from getting into crime in the first place. But there are two sides to this conversation. Right. The police can do a better job, and every single community in America can also do a better job. The black community can do a better job with their kids, with their families. White community can do a better job with our kids and our families. Everybody. Why are we only talking about one side of the issue? Right. Because I think if you just don't be a jerk when a cop comes up to you, most of the time you're going to be just fine. If you don't have an attitude when you say, officer, you don't have the right to search my car, but if you're like, you do not have the right to search my car, get out of here. Like, what do you think the cop is going to do in response?
You said the same thing, but added a get out of here.
I did. Yeah, the get out of here part.
I didn't buy it.
It was over. Like, it was a little higher.
I'm unconvinced.
He escalated it.
Please,
if I'm an officer,
please, leave.
You'd be getting the baton very quickly.
Teeth gone.
No, and I think
Already
all these points we
unholstering.
address. Here's the thing: in the national conversation, we talk about bad cops, right? And we talk about peaceful protesters, and some people talk about bad actors, as they say, rioters and looters, or as I describe them, the majority. And then we also talk about bad white people and good white people. But there is no national conversation about recognizing good cops, specifically good black cops. And that does matter as we're going to parse everybody into statistics by race. It's something that is worthwhile discussing when you have a higher percentage of police officers who are black than the general population in America. Why do we examine the intricacies and get granular as it relates to race in every other facet where there really isn't any kind of consistency if we're talking about unarmed black people shot versus unarmed white people, if we're talking about government project housing, we're talking about people spending, but it is undeniably right in front of us that there is a higher percentage of black officers than black Americans. If you want to ask the tough questions, how about you ask why those black Americans have decided that the best way to serve their community is to join the police force, and why they don't get a spot on your quadrant view on CNN. Okay, we're going to talk about Drew Brees here in a second, but right now, YouTube, thank you. You must go. Piss off. It's Mug Club only.